Morning and welcome to the day 4 of our thought for the day. So,
yeah. This is Helen.
You're Berno.
Thank you.
Or at least I hope you're Berno.
Yeah. And hopefully you should know me by now, and Helen too, because you've watched all the other videos.
Yes, if not, go and watch them and come back. Otherwise, you're coming in halfway through a conversation and we might confuse you.
Yeah. So what is our conversation about, Helen?
Today we are looking at church culture and traditions.
Yeah, and how young people might perceive that, and how they encounter it, maybe. But also, when we're talking at church, we're kind of talking very generally here, aren't we?
Yeah, none of this is specific to All Saints, because of course I've never been to one of your services. I haven't been able to do that. So if I'm mentioning things, it's definitely not meant as a dig. And
I didn't grow up in the Church of England either. I've had a load of various experiences of different congregations and the way they do things. So this is kind of a very broad perspective, really. But I guess talking Church of England, since we are part of the Church of England.
We're both Church of England,
and most of you watching this might be. It's quite deeply rooted in tradition, isn't it?
Yes.
But
oh my goodness, yes.
Okay, so tell me now, because I didn't grow up in the Church of England, what kind of, if you were a young person, never been to church, and you would come into church, what is the thing you think would...
The things I remember, so I became a Christian when I was in my late 20s, about 26, 27, so just trying to think back to then, the things that greatly confused me, so my church is very informal anyway, so I was used to a very relaxed, low church style anyway, but certainly visiting some of the other churches in our local area or going up to the big services at Salisbury Cathedral, this whole standing and turning to face the gospel, which, well, now it's been explained to me, I get. That confused the living daylights out of me the first time that happened. And song responses.
Okay.
That gets, I'm not musical.
So you feel very awkward then?
I feel desperately awkward on song responses. That really gets me, because also it's not a part of my church tradition. We just speak.
Okay, so that's kind of the higher end of church.
That is the higher end of church, but those are the things that tripped me up when I was in my 20s and sort of visiting other services and stuff. These days I just accept that there are things that I'm not comfortable with, and I accept that. I go, I've got no idea what's going on.
But that takes time to kind of get in that place, doesn't it?
To feel confident that God doesn't care that you're confused by the surface.
No, that's interesting, because with church tradition, church culture, we've got our very own way of speaking and the usage of words. We were talking to Dan Head earlier. Dan, if you're watching. And he was saying how amongst his friends and things who don't go to church, for them it's the language and the jargon we use, like...
What does redemption mean?
Yeah, or sanctification, or righteousness, or... And this is words we use all the time, right? But they for someone who's never been to church, those are quite packed terms, aren't they?
They're and we obviously use them in really specific ways, but
or confession, or the way we run our services. Through liturgy, we've got these specific words. And if you've been going to church for years, you don't even bat an eyelid, you know what's going on. But someone else coming in and the words you use is just alien. And so you feel very much out of place, don't you?
Yeah.
So that's something we need to think about, like when we're doing things, when we're running a service or when we're presenting anything, we need to be quite mindful of the words we use. It's not that we're going to offend anyone, might just go over their heads.
and it's not that we want to dumb things down.
No.
That's because these are big concepts, but
this is the thing, actually you're not dumbing things down, because then you have to start thinking about what the word actually means and how do I explain it, and suddenly... Like that.
You have a richer understanding yourself.
You do, definitely. So that's the thing. Try and explain something to someone who has no idea.
But that's kind of the structural stuff. But there's all of those unspoken traditions as well.
Such as?
I remember my grandfather one day had a huge rant about wearing jeans in church.
Okay, yeah. Do you know what? Speaking of that, it's when I went to Salisbury Cathedral, I had my hat on, because I normally do. It's just what you do. You wear a hat because you don't brush your hair in the morning. And they asked me to take my hat off. And I did, that's fine. But I was a bit like, okay, I didn't understand why. I guess it was some form of sign of respect.
Yeah.
But to whom, I was not sure about that. And so, I still wear a hat in church. But things like that, like the way we perceive other people because of our own...
Yeah, or even the other way round, where you think you know a tradition, it's just sort of, okay, church is Sunday best, that's fine. And then you turn up and realise everyone's in jeans and t-shirts. We had one young couple turn up to midnight mass at Christmas a few years ago.
Yeah.
And obviously they hadn't been to church, but they knew the Lord's Prayer from school.
Right.
And so we started in with Our Father in Heaven. They went straight because it was the words they hadn't realised the words had changed, and they went in Our Father who art in heaven.
Right, so they went for the
and it was so you could see them go, oh.
And that talks about like translation, Bible translations and
Yes.
things that we use as well, and how easy to, because you've got all these various different translations, how easy is it to understand when someone, particularly the young people we work with, they have never read the Bible. You have to tell them what the big numbers and the little numbers mean. And so then if you're using a translation which use complicated terms or old-fashioned language, you're losing them completely. And so there's so much really that we take for granted or that we used to that we don't realise unless you encounter people who've never been in it. You actually don't realise just how foreign we can be because of church culture. So something to think about. How do we
we're not aliens. We are fellow human beings. And yet, I think to our culture can look completely, and Sunday morning culture can look completely and utterly alien.
Yeah, it can do. Yeah. So have a think. How do you think the way we do church or you do church, how would that be perceived by someone who's never been in it and who's not ever encountered anything like that? Because that'd be quite an interesting thing to think through. And then like, what solutions do you think we can put in place? Or how can we make the service more engaging for someone who has never been to church? Great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Helen.
Thank you. We'll see you tomorrow.
Yeah, Lord, as we think today about the traditions we have in our congregations, the culture that we've developed, the words we use, the way we do things, and what we sometimes think is acceptable, and how we can misunderstand people or misread people, or have false impressions because of our own lack of understanding sometimes, Lord. I pray that you'll help us with that. Help us to present your word and your truth in a way that is understandable and clear. And remind us, Lord, when we don't do that, when we teach us how to do it. I think sometimes we can get so used to the way that we're doing things, we sometimes don't realise what a different way is, or if there is another way. But Lord, also we know that there are certain traditions that we do that are very important, and so the culture that we have formed here can be really good and helpful, Lord. And so I pray that you'll help us to develop a way that we can make people feel welcome, make people be part of your community, and be drawn into your presence. Because of the people who we are, because we are your people, Lord. Amen.